Hey guys, welcome back to yet another episode of Top Billers Toolkit, where me and my twin brother interview top billers from all around the globe to unlock the secrets to their success. Today's guest is Kellyll, otherwise known as Anto. Anto is an 800k biller, and he's the only top biller I've ever met that successfully uses podcasts to win new accounts. He can attribute 80 to 90% of his entire company's sales directly and indirectly from the podcast. It's also allowed him to build an absolute powerhouse of a brand within his niche. Today, you're probably going to be learning a completely new BD tactic that's unlike anything you've heard before. We're going to be delving into the exact steps that Anto takes in order to use his podcast as a successful BD tool. We're also going to be delving into Anto's day plan and understanding all the other powerful BD tactics that he uses. And we're going to be talking about why becoming the go-to brand in his niche has been an absolute game changer. Strap yourselves in, guys, because this is going to be a fantastic episode. As usual, grab a cuppa or a glass of wine, depending on when you're listening to this, and let's get into it, shall we? Anto, I've been told that you prefer Anto as a nickname, but Anto, it's lovely to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Cheers, lads. Nice to be here. Appreciate it.
Awesome. I'm really, really looking forward to this one because you are successfully using old school methods and new technologies like podcasts, which for me and Sam has been an absolute game changer. But let's start with the first question, which is, what's the number one tool in your toolkit, whether it be a mindset, strategy, or software?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I probably will have to say what's always worked well for me was being a niche market specialist. Everyone always thinks, less is less, particularly in recruitment, less jobs to work, less candidates to speak to. See a lot of people out there who say, "Oh, I'm a software recruiter." They do Python, Java, front end, DevOps, and gets very hard. I've done that. Luckily I started off doing manual QA, moved then to just automation QA. Then I actually moved into data as a whole about 7 years ago. And I tell you what, that's where I really felt like I was at my end, speaking to a lot of clients, signing a lot of terms, but one day you're working a data analyst, then it's a data engineer, then it's machine learning engineer, then it's a BI developer. Then I'd still done well, as a niche market specialist doing QA. Struggled, I'd say, with my time when I branched out and done the whole of data. And then as data, I picked AI, then I picked a micro niche within that being computer vision. And that just gave me a lot more control over my own time and how I spent it. All the candidates I was speaking to were definitely reusable. The leads are all relevant because you're also mapping out your market, and clients, they were very, very receptive to it as well, because, it's a super niche within an already super niche of software. And, there'll be some people who I'm in contact with, whether they're current customers, past customers, or wannabe customers, probably about 6 or 7 years. It's a lot of calls, coffees, FaceTime. Can't really keep on top of that if you're trying to chase the next thing, but the next thing might not be exactly what you've just been doing. So for me, I think that was a big one. Helps with getting candidates multiple interviews. And I mean, look, if you can win a new client and already have 3 to 5 CVs that you think are going to get you interviews straight away, first off, you're definitely more passionate about wanting to work with that client. Probably your own personal motivation probably becomes an easier sell, because you just know that if they work with you, you're going to be able to make a difference, or it's not hard work, because it's just what you do.
That's really interesting. I have to say, niching is definitely one of the most popular topics, I think, for recruiters that haven't yet reached like top biller status. Every single top biller always in a niche within a niche within a niche, but the recruiters that aspire to be top billers, I think I even got a message the other day from a recruiter saying he doesn't know what niche to go for. So how did you make that decision as to what micro niche to go into? And was it like an epiphany? Did something happen, or did you just enjoy it? Like, what was the decision-making process?
Yeah, well, starting off, I was in S3, it was giving QA. That was quite a relatively niche in the software space. I think good training there. Probably about 9 or 10 colleagues I had just doing permanent recruitment in Dublin, all doing software, all doing different tech. So pretty clear to know who doing what, where was everything was going. But then when I moved to all this, that was the start of where I was doing all of data. I remember jumping on my first client call for the job intake, and it was in computer vision, and they asked me did I have any experience with hiring people who are writing their own tensor RT models on custom GPUs, because that works better on their own pre-trained or their own custom trained model. Honestly, language the whole call was just language that I've never heard before, and I was like, I'm in over my head here a little bit. And I suppose rather than running away from it, because I would have considered myself a bit of a technical recruiter anyway, I would have had a good insight into what the technology done and what linked up well together. But I was like, if I don't know what this is, I think nobody will know what this is. And that was sort of where I ran towards it. And that would have been about 5 years ago, was where I just started going towards computer vision. And then COVID actually kicked in about 2 months later, and all like my large desk of data science, machine learning jobs all completely got killed. But then the clients that actually stayed hiring were computer vision clients.
Mm,
So for me, I was like, right, there's something here. All these companies are less than 20 people, got no HR team, have all got funding. Obviously, it's new
mm,
and upcoming tech, so their sort of budgets were innovation budgets. They had to build new software, they had to build new technologies as part of their VC investment or whatever it might have been. Whereas, if you're working with Just Eat or something, the product's established, they can cut costs straight away. So we
mm,
would have had some larger companies that we did work with that was the norm in AI. But yeah, all these sort of innovation companies where a product is actually built and developed on computer vision. It's like walking into a company that does front end software and they don't have JavaScript developers,
mm.
but for computer vision.
Interesting. So there was just a clear demand, and you thought you've got to take advantage of this.
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned, Anto, that you on a call and they were saying lingo that was way above your head. And then I'm guessing you had to go deeper and learn about the industry. How did you go about doing that for someone who wants to follow in your footsteps and just kind of like learn a super niche? How did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was I really just wanted to map out what the companies were, who were they. Before I'd spoken to that company before, I'd never even heard of a computer vision engineer.
Hmm.
The role was actually advertised as a software engineer, and the job spec just had a load of words like NVIDIA technologies that I just didn't know. So rather than just looking at the technology, I just started searching companies that had computer vision engineers.
Mm.
Um, and then slowly I got, I think, like every company in Germany that I could find on LinkedIn that had a computer vision engineer, um, written into like one long Excel list. Started like reverse engineering that for decision makers, for industries, for job titles, and that was sort of how I created my computer vision market.
Really interesting. Cool. That's great. And I guess on the subject of winning new clients, you're the only recruiter we have on the podcast, and Anto, and probably the only recruiter I've spoken to ever actually that has that's successfully leveraging a podcast to win new business. So I'd love to touch on that a little bit. When we had a call before this, you said you've successfully used old school methods and modern technology to win new business. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, if that's all right?
Yeah, well, I do sort of see myself as that sort of old school traditional recruiter picking up the phones. I'm S3 trained, so you're gonna be. Even though I was given a market when I joined S3, I was never given a job, even though it was a warm desk. I was actually taking it from someone who was transitioning into a leadership role, so they were sort of covering off their last vacancies rather than having them passed over. But my first week in recruitment was just a cold call into clients where I had no knowledge of the market, whether these companies were looking to hire or not. So it was tough for me, but it worked. I picked up a brand new client at S3 Ireland I'd never even worked with before, and made a couple of placements. But you could kind of see it was a bit of a gap filler. It was a gap filler for them. That company just needed someone to fill a hole, and I was that
Mm,
person. Which is kind of like where now I use a lot of, like, you call them new school methods, right? To build brand or reputation that almost precedes itself. So, I mean, on top of like podcasts, I've been hosting in-person meetup events, online meetup events. We sponsor AI and founders conferences with the sort of demographic that we want to put ourselves in front of. So I've probably been podcasting for about 7 years,
Wow.
using it as a way to target companies, managers who I wanted to speak with. Flattery, let's say. Probably why I'm here. As well as hosting a meetup. So for me, it works really well. Um, and it's, I think on top of it, I don't just rely on like the podcasts or the meetups or even just picking up the phone. Even though I don't recruit in the UK, I live in the UK now, but I still do about 20 face-to-face client meetings a month. Like it's super important to me. I'll go out to Berlin, I'll go 3 or 4 days, or other parts of Germany or Switzerland, and I'll be back to back 5 to 6 meetings a day. Sometimes I'll host 2 events, like a leadership roundtable on Tuesday, and on Wednesday it's a meetup. So again, just all these things to create this reputation, this brand that absolutely perceives itself. Then when it comes to it, these conversations become quite easy. I'm hosting an event for leaders in computer vision on self-driving cars. You're a leader in self-driving cars. You want to have a talk? Also, I do a podcast and I interview other leaders from self-driving car companies.
That's really interesting.
Such a great conversation starter, isn't it? Because I know, Anto, there's some people that have started a podcast, maybe got a few guests on, but haven't managed to turn it into a successful BD activity. So can you go into like, if you were to write down on a piece of paper, like, this is how I do it, can you take us through a step-by-step of like your process from podcasts, inviting them on, and then how you transition that to a meeting, if that's okay?
Yeah, I can try as best I can.
So I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, I think like a lot of it does come in with, and I think I'm going to mix it up with new school, old school technique, right?
Cool.
Sometimes I'm just asking people straight up on LinkedIn, whether it's then a LinkedIn message follow up. I do voice notes, I do video notes on LinkedIn. I email people, I cold call people, asking them if they want to be in my podcast. I check who's in my network that I've done podcasts with, who they're connected with. If we're mutual connections, can I get referrals? Can I get recommendations? So like that's like building this funnel. Like, so for me, it's co-founders of computer vision businesses, people who are VPs, heads of AI, whatever that might be, mapping them out to see who you think the decision makers would be. And I mean, for me, I leave it relatively open when it comes to my guests, right? The decision makers, the leaders. I did have podcasts before that didn't yield results, and they would have actually been very tech focused. So I might like interview someone. Oh, great, you're the lead software engineer on this computer vision product that's doing like Amazon, self checkouts. The end of the day, that person is probably not. They weren't at the influential level that I needed them to be at. So I took one time to stop recording for a bit. I think it was actually when I was having my baby, and I came back to work and I was like, right, how do I get more value out of this? It's who makes the decisions. So slightly change the content of what I was looking to deliver as well, so that I could engage the right decision makers from that. Now, I want to add before this, I think in my 2.5 years at Trenovo, to my podcasts and meetups, I think there was about 900 grand in sales directly coming from those.
Jesus.
And that was without me saying, I can do better with the time I put in. So that was
you
like,
still made 900K from that old podcast that you said wasn't working as well?
yes.
Wow,
yes.
bloody hell.
Bloody hell.
That sounds like it was working, but obviously you have higher expectations, I'm guessing.
It does. But for me, I wanted to take it into creating this brand or this reputation that precedes itself. People see you or a CEO or a CTO or a co-founder resharing your podcast versus like a technical PM. The illusion of your business is that, right? You know what? If I want to listen for top industry professionals or people who are really influential, not to say that tech PMs aren't, but tech PMs are working closer with the software. I ended up wanting to work closer with the people who are making decisions because, let's say, like business penetration, opportunity to get business for not just DeepRec but other parts of the Trenovo group, definitely worked really well for that.
That's
I've
really
got to ask,
interesting.
Anto, you said the podcast that wasn't working well generated like 900,000. How much is the podcast that is working well generated then? If you've got a round figure.
I don't know, but I would probably attribute about 80 to 90% of all deep Rex
Wow.
sales in some way.
That's
And then
mad.
so quite a substantial amount.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Mainly becoming that, it's customers that are super engaged with your brand.
Mm,
And then they don't see anyone else but you.
that's crazy, man.
Really. What would you say is just so I can get an idea of, let's say you reach out to 10 co-founders, what's the success rate of the amount of people that say, hey, put their hand up and say, hey, Anto, yeah, I'd love to come on your podcast?
Might be about 10%, 20%.
Cool. Still not bad. So you send 10 messages and you might get 1 or 2 people that say, yes, I'll come on.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think it's not too bad. I think one of the things I've learned though over the 7 years, because you asked, and a lot of people start one and it doesn't work, and I can see that. I can see where it comes from. But I think again, like when I go back 7 years ago, I was doing Berlin, and I was probably doing about 40 client meetings a month back then because I was in a full 180 role, which I was assigned terms and conditions and win business, and it was pretty intense. So I was in Berlin 3 times a month for 3 to 5 days, so anywhere between 12 to 15 days.
Wow.
Yeah, I use the term getting friend zoned, right? People never see you as a recruiter if you're a podcast host first. So for me, it was setting clear boundaries around like what we do, who we are. Not, hey, like for me, we're not a community-led recruitment business. We're not. We're a deep tech recruitment business. We help you solve your deep tech recruitment needs. That's what we do. I don't misconstrue that at any point when I'm doing podcast prep, podcast follow-up, I'm getting phone numbers. I actually will tell people, just so you know, whenever I see you posting the job, I'm gonna call you.
I love that.
I don't hide from it. I don't think we need to. If anything, I think they respect it a little bit more.
That's cool, man. I feel like, yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like that's one part of, I mean, there's many parts, but you're not hiding from the fact that you're using this as a lead generation opportunity as well as providing value. Is that kind of where you're going, Anto? Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that kind of brings me on to, you've kind of already touched upon it, but I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, Anto, but the money from the podcast is probably more in the follow-up than, initially jumping off and being like, yeah, I've got 3 roads. It's probably like you've built a relationship with them and then there's multiple follow-ups past that point to which you build a longer term relationship. Do you mind just telling us a little bit about those different stages that you go through typically with a client after the podcast?
Yeah, so I mean, you can have your multiple follow-up points, right? You generally only ever get a handful of minutes after the actual recording, less than 5. Schedule it like maybe like if they're up for a 15-minute chat. Really, you also know timelines of that lead by doing the podcast, right? Someone's like, oh, we're going to be raising Series A in 9 months. Honestly, you don't want to have to start thinking about your follow-up process for 6. Again, and if you set your expectations right, you're not just that salesperson that's, oh, he knows I'm raising now. No, I told you I'm going to contact you when you're hiring. If they're hiring right now, I'll be like, oh, great, look, thanks for this. By the way, I buy everyone who's on my podcast lunch. Let's grab lunch whenever I'm in whatever city they're in next. Or I'm hosting this event. I want you to come. It's for leaders in your space. And then after the event, you're like, oh, let's grab lunch because I want to buy a lunch for the podcast. And then you've actually doubled up and you got 2 big value adds on top of it. And again, these are the decision makers, the influencers of their businesses. So I think as long as it's like, for me, I'm going to say FaceTime. For me, it's FaceTime. People are still willing to give you FaceTime, whether you're buying them lunch or not. They're going to know there's a sales pitch coming with lunch. Terms and conditions, there's a sales pitch coming after this lunch.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. So you're asking strategic questions to get information off them, some information anyway, in terms of like funding, for example, and then asking for a 15-minute chat or scheduling lunch after the podcast. That's really clever. And then what percentage of clients do you think, like how many people say yes to that chat compared to like maybe saying yes on the 4th follow-up? Like how many
follow, like how long do you think it takes to build that relationship after the podcast? Is it like a set time, or does it vary?
Oh, I wish there was a set time. Like I think one of the funniest ones I have is I'm finally, hopefully this week, converting a customer who I had speak at one of my online conferences in March in COVID. So like
Oh, wow.
literally when doors shut in COVID in March, I put on an online event. He spoke at the last week of March. So that's 4 years.
Wow, that's crazy. Wow.
A long time ago. But you can see. But I've also had some people who I've rang after a podcast and they're like, actually, we need 5 people right now. You know, so there's definitely it's potluck, but as I said, like podcast preparation is super important. Like for me, I'm getting full client and job qualifications in that 30 minutes. I'm getting a scale of when they're next, what hires they're going to be doing in 12, 18 months, whether it's AI, software, DevOps, support, like any roles that we can or we want to be pitching for any Trenovo business. And that's where that comes in for me, more so than just relentlessly following up. Then also then every sort of meeting or every time I'm in that country for meetings, if it's Germany, if it's Switzerland, I have someone to go to, right? If I have a gap in my calendar and I've got 2 hours to kill, I can always put in 30 minutes, 45 minutes with one of these people. Be like, oh, look, you said in 3 months you're going to be having a raise, or you're going to be hiring for 1 or 2 people. Let's have a chat now, see how that's going. So it's
And
constant,
Anto, those
but
are always,
there's no 1 to 14 step.
sorry to interrupt, man. And those people, Anto, are typically the ones that you catch up with in Germany off the cuff, or typically people you've had on the podcast already. Am I right in
Yeah.
saying that? So you've already developed that relationship with?
Yeah, it's quite easy, you know, and a lot of it post event, let's say, you have to do it well though, because I know I did friends on myself a lot. And you know, WhatsApping people for a beer in Germany can almost never see it as a viable business partner with some people. So I think it's all about your approach. I wish I could say I know exactly what it was that I learned. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's making sure that it's decision makers and it's business. Even if you WhatsApp them from a beer, you're going in there and you're asking about the hiring every time. It's not a social visit. I used to almost be too afraid to address the elephant in the room of saying, yeah, I'm actually a recruiter. I got you on my podcast because I want to make business and do sales with you. Less of that. And it really started to turn a lot better results. And by that, I mean like customers that were multiple placements lasting over longer period of time.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So just having the confidence, right? It sounds like it. You just had the confidence and confidence to go in and ask for it. Regarding, so it sounds like a lot of the qualifying questions were on the podcast. Am I right in saying that? Is that you're asking them on the actual podcast? Am I right in saying that, Anto?
At least in the prep, you know.
Cool. Cool. In the prep. So more in the prep call before they come on the podcast, you're asking those types of questions.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool.
Podcasts can be very much around like how do they make business decisions around AI or I don't know, like ethics to the EU legislation for the AI Act, you know. Don't think people on the listening want to know, oh great, he's going to hire 2 ML engineers.
Yeah, cool.
in
I wanted to
18
clarify
months.
that, but yeah, cool.
Yeah. But for me,
I actually thought,
I want to get the whole, I want to get the whole state of your business. I want to see where you are right now. What's going on? Give me an idea of what your journey's been like. When did you last hire? What type of people did you hire? Why did you hire them? And
yeah,
then,
I love
great.
that.
When are you going? When are you going next? Great. How do they shape your business? And then, like, I mean, for me, it takes 10 minutes to get that information. Then you can do 20 minutes prep for the actual podcast.
It's really clever. It's really clever. It's simple, but it's very clever because that's what me and Sam have experienced as well. When we get people, the call before the podcast, they're so open. Most people are so open. They're just willing to share, like, because I feel like their guard is down. And so when you ask them these types of questions, the framing is for the podcast as opposed to for recruitment, which is really interesting. So yeah, that's really, and I guess those qualifying questions that you ask, you now have ammo to follow up with them strategically after the podcast because you have all this information.
Yeah,
Really
I mean, off the topic of podcast, but I do think like I introduced that to many possible parts of my recruitment cycle as I can.
Mm.
Same as you take a job spec call, job intake, you want to ask these questions, find out, culture fit, everything like that. And then you want to ask them, great, what are you going to ask them in the first interview? What's the topics? What exact questions are you going through? And I will do that with brand new clients that I've never worked with as well. So for me, I don't know, I would say direct, just being direct and letting them know this is what I'm here for. I can actually start asking these questions to candidates when I'm on the phone with them to see if they're worth me putting in front of you.
Yeah,
Very
love that,
interesting.
man. I feel like you've mastered how to utilize the podcast and then turn that into business, Ando, which is it's fascinating because I haven't met anyone who's managed to do that with such efficiency yet, which is awesome. Lots of tips for me and Ben as well, actually.
Absolutely. The other thing I'd love to ask, because I remember when we spoke, you said that the podcast was a big part of your business, but then the other area was specking CVs. And, I feel like that's an art in itself. There's some recruiters that can do it exceptionally well and others that have to send hundreds and hundreds and maybe get someone at the end. So would you mind talking us through your strategy around specking as well,
Yeah.
Anto?
So I say like specking mixed with traditional BD, like picking up the phone. I guess to go back and say, like, let's say I said like a lot of like 80% of the business comes from podcasts. Now, even post podcast, as long as I've set like the tone that, yeah, I'm a recruiter. I help you hire computer vision professionals in self-driving cars. That's what I do. And I've got that qualification off them. I might not convert them directly from the podcast, and it might be more of a traditional BD approach. But the initial rapport and relationship was built off that. So I can spec them, and I do. Feel free to spec them every time I've got a relevant candidate. If we're doing sales days or if I'm doing my cold calling day, I will still call them. And I think, yeah, for me, it's a non-negotiable, no matter how busy I am, that I do some form of BD every week. The ideal is that I actually do 2 afternoons a week. Every week I'm trying to set myself goals for high quality sales and at least 5 meetings. So let's say 15 sales and 5 meetings a week is sort of where I want to see myself in terms of like traditional BD outputs. But then the specs that go in on top of that, I would say they're really high quality. So I mentioned about how I broke down my market of computer vision. I mapped out 500 companies and I've went to go really deep within that. So creating digital avatar companies is a niche within computer vision. Autonomous driving, which is a lot of self-driving cars, is a niche within computer vision. Medical imaging, person tracking, like video tracking. And I would say I've got like this broken down. I've broken down computer vision into like 15, 16 areas. So when I'm BDing, I got a list of self-driving car companies. So then when I speak to a really good candidate who does self-driving cars and computer vision, I know exactly where they're going. Now I would say like the worst part about this is that it's actually very boring work to build this high quality list. But the work that you get off it is really good. Like even like 4 weeks ago, I got a company who came back to me because I spec'd them in a candidate a year and a half ago. I'm assuming they saved this email somewhere and they messaged me back a year and a half later to say, yes, can you help us with hiring?
That's
I
mad.
love that.
I've since filled the role in less than 4 weeks, but I spec'd them in someone who was helping radiologists with detecting cancer with computer vision.
Wow.
That company helps radiologists with detecting cancer using computer vision.
Wow.
So
Okay.
for me, it's like complete. Like I wouldn't ever send a company a Python software engineer because they hire Python software engineers. If I was more so speaking at like wide markets, I'd probably be like, oh, he's a Python software engineer at a large marketplace working at the checkout part of software. So I would be trying to find them someone who does that, works in the same industry and works on checkout software and back end systems. So to me, I think like it's a very you're not going to be sending 100 specs a week.
Yeah.
Granted, when I started, I did. I used to mass spec every single week the entire database. But that was a long time ago. But now, like my list of 500, companies, I could probably only end up specking out 20 times a week. But when I spec out 20 times a week, it's someone in generative AI to generative AI companies, or medical imaging to medical imaging companies. And of course, computer vision.
That's such great advice. What I got from that is like specificity is key. Like the more specific these candidates, the more successful. And would you say that does the majority of the heavy lifting when it comes to, you know, reaching out, or have you found that there's other little tricks that you need to do in order to get their attention?
I'm gonna say what I've already said, is pick up the phone. I mean, we live in a world where we can track who's actually opening emails. You know, I think my very first client that I won at Trenovo, I sent the CV and I tracked the open rates, and in 12 hours they'd opened it like something like 60 times. Now, granted, that was probably him forwarding it to other team members and all that, and it accumulates very quickly. They didn't email me back. So the next day I picked up the phone straight away, pitched them, got the business on, and they were the first client I signed up, and I ended up making 7 placements off them in 5 months.
Wow.
And
Such
probably
great
wouldn't have
advice.
come about if you just didn't pick up the phone. Is that what you're saying, Anto?
I would say so, yeah.
That's mad.
But in conjunction with looking at the tracking data, which I think is brilliant, looking at who's actually, you know, put their hand up or at least shown some sort of interest, which is, again, just a really great tip.
Yeah, I think the value then as well, right? If you ring someone that you've sent maybe 2 or 3 specs to, you've been sending them relevant content on LinkedIn, voice notes, video messages, and then you ring them, it's like, oh, Anthony, I have people say, oh, I know who it is. I know. I was like, I help companies hire digital avatars. He was like, I know.
That's what you want, isn't it?
I'm like, how do you take a sales call from there? And he says, I know exactly who you are, and I know exactly what you do. I think it's really cool. But we and then he went on to tell me he was raising funding, but it was again, it's a sales call that just lands quite easy.
Yeah. Just want to go back to your candidates for a second, Anto, because you only spec 20 a week, you said, and they have to be
lucky, yeah.
If you're lucky, yeah. So you know, they're probably quite hard to find. They don't come around very often. How do you go about finding or attracting those types of candidates? Are you spending hours and hours hunting down that specific skill set, or like, can you just give us an insight into how you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, to give you an example from today, I was working a job on LinkedIn. I hide all my candidates that are irrelevant to my searches. I got to send out 60 messages on LinkedIn, but I had hidden 1,340 profiles. So, I mean, that's like 0.5% of every profile I look at, I will actually even send a message to. So yeah, the talent isn't hard to find, but I can tell you, if a company who's hiring for these talents right now wants access to them, I can get a short list of 5 like within an hour. Like that's my pitch. It's not, I don't go down the road of we've got a great MPS. To be fair, we do. But it's not my selling point. Like for us, it's that we get access to top talent. We don't even just use LinkedIn. We'll search people through their GitHub repos. We'll search Google Scholar and see who's got like the latest papers, if they're relevant to our clients. And we're using a whole bunch of just different techniques to get this sort of AI research talent. It's not easy, and I would say, yeah, the cost of acquisition per talent is a lot higher than most businesses. But also our opportunity to get these candidates multiple interviews is a lot higher, because we work with a lot of the same companies. Like I had one candidate I got 9 interviews for back in February.
Wow.
So we tried to recreate that. That was a once-off, of course, but we try to recreate that as much as we possibly can. And it's the same. I have everyone in the team here doing a super niche market. Everyone is able to generate multiple interviews at clients and multiple interviews for a candidate. So again, just trying to increase our possible return off the cost of acquiring a candidate.
Love that, man. Can we go back to you do 2 afternoons of BD, you said, Anto?
Yes. In a good week, yeah.
On a good week, yeah, cool. Can you just imagine you're about to sit down and start your BD? And a lot of our audience, I love this as well. Can you just map out how you go about doing it step by step? Like,
Do you sit down, prepare a list, start calling, send an email, follow? What do you do on those afternoons?
Well, so first off, I won't prepare the list during BD time. It's always
That's
got to be done.
interesting.
It's always got to be done beforehand.
Cool.
If you set yourself 4 hours in the afternoon, what if it takes you 3 hours to prepare? I can't remember who's the guy that says about chopping a tree. If he 10 hours to chop a tree, spend 9 hours sharpening his axe.
Yeah, I
George
can't remember who
Washington.
said
I
that.
can't
I've heard
remember
of
who
that.
it is either.
George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, I think it was. But yeah. So I mean, like for me, it's
I think it was
have
Lincoln. Sorry, yeah.
we have all that done beforehand. And I think being a niche market specialist, it definitely helps because you're never really calling anyone different. So like most of the time, kind of gunning on if you haven't got a contact number for someone that I wouldn't even include this in my BD time, right? That we're sending voice notes, video messages on LinkedIn, sending them articles, trying to get something that might even relate to a phone number to come back to, which is always good. If someone's been on a podcast, you got a phone number to go to. So I'll always try to have a list of about 200 phone numbers, always there, ready to go, twice a week. So I mean, you do well to call 100 people a day in an afternoon. Honestly, I don't check their careers pages. I don't check any news about them. I just call as many of them as I can in that afternoon and see what comes out of it.
Love that.
That's
So calling
interesting.
is your main tactic in those BD afternoons. You're getting the lists already prepared, and then if you can get 100 calls out, that's a good afternoon of BD.
I would prefer if I didn't get the 100 calls out because it means nobody's answering.
Yeah, good point.
Good point. Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of that, and I mean the goal of that, like for me, I aim to book a follow-up meeting more so than I aim to pull a job or terms on a phone call. I think you can often catch people when they're quite happy to just talk about recruitment or talk about their problems and how you can be their savior and you can make everything great. But then there's a severe lack of follow-up or appetite from them. And you might have discussed the terms, you might have discussed the job, you might send them over an email, great, I'm ready, looking forward to get started. You might send them 3 CVs and you get nothing. But like for me, the biggest commitment of someone willing to work from you or with you, sorry, is that they will go from a phone call to a dedicated 30, 45-minute slot to specifically talk about recruitment. So I don't go into these to say, I want to pull X jobs. I'm going in and I'm my goal is meetings.
Yeah, love
Great
that,
advice.
mate.
That was exactly what another chap we had, a £2 million biller that we had on last week, said the exact same thing. He said the first call is information gathering and basically booking another call. Like that was his objective, information gathering and booking another call, because he said, yeah, the likelihood of getting a job in that call is quite slim from most people. So yeah, another great piece of advice.
And sorry, Ben, just one last question. And what about so you make those 100 calls, and so you'll speak to some people, hopefully majority of them or a good portion. You will get some of them to commit to an additional call afterwards in a week or so, or whenever. What's your follow-up process after that? Is it emails? Is it LinkedIn? Is it voice notes? Like, can you talk us through that?
Mixture of everything, really. When I'm not going off plan, I've built in these quite methodical sales processes into Sourcewell, so that when I try to call someone and I hit no answer, it actually sends them out a follow-up email. Hey, I tried to call you today. I was hoping to speak to you about this. Next thing you know, I've attached like a deep rec salary guide for if they're based in Munich, Berlin, Switzerland, whatever. So again, it's not like I don't have a catch-all sequence. So I'll say medical imaging people. I tried to call you today. I wanted to speak to you about this candidate, medical imaging CV attached, and it automatically goes out as soon as I hit no answer.
Love that. That's wicked. That must save you hours, just that little thing. It's really clever.
Yeah. And then what it does is I set it so that I automatically reminds me to do a call back 5 working days later.
Love that, man. Again, really simple little things, but saves you hours of time and really effective. Absolutely
Yeah, BD planning is really saving you that time is pretty nice.
I have to ask, Anne, does the charm of the Irish accent help at all when you're on the phone? Have you ever had compliments or people mentioning your accent at all?
Not in Germany, I'm afraid.
No, fine.
I would imagine it would go down a lot better in maybe like the UK or the US.
Yeah.
The Germans don't even get it. They just say, "Oh, I'll use UK recruiters. Keep calling me." I'm like,
Oh, really?
I'm not from the UK. I was like, yes, I'm sitting here. Then I started telling them, oh, we've actually got a Berlin registered business, and sometimes tell them I live in Berlin. If I feel it's gonna turn it around.
Cool.
But
Does it?
no,
Because
accentism has never worked for me.
fine. Okay, cool. We have to. I have to say, it does help for me and Sam when we speak to recruiters in the US. It's automatically a differentiator, which is quite nice. Um, does Is it a big difference working if you were to compare UK clients and clients from Germany? What are the biggest differences in terms of how they work, fees, the quality of the client, do you think?
Fees are definitely higher in Germany.
Mm,
Salaries remain the same. Switzerland fees are higher, salaries are even higher. Then we've got the US fees are higher, salaries are probably triple. So I
wow.
mean, we've sort of selectively picked our markets so that, I mean, as individuals, everyone can get more for the same job, right? In the UK, everyone's used to working with a recruiter. A lot of businesses will actually have their choice recruiter. Talent's tough. In Berlin, still the most open to working with recruiters in Germany. Still
Interesting.
resistant.
Mm,
I would say Switzerland still resistant. And when I say resistant, it's that it's not started sort of part of their minimum business process or their standard business processes, right? In the UK, I mean, you can't even find a recruitment agency that doesn't work with recruiters.
mm,
It's just how it is. Um, in Germany, they try to take like they'll want to arrange interviews, they'll want to make offers. They try to take the candidate control away from you. I don't know
mm,
if it's they think they're better at you than it or not, but they definitely aren't. So I mean,
mm,
like for me, it's always making sure that your German clients aren't just going to randomly go call your candidate after final stage interview, make them an
mm,
offer that they won't accept, or
mm,
present the offer in a bad way without addressing potential concerns that could just throw the deal in doubt. So it's all then I think about setting up your client control in Germany from the start. To set it up, I do believe the processes that I grew up learning in Ireland, as same as the UK, are a lot better than how a standard company in England, in Germany would actually work with a recruiter, right? You can send them a CV and they basically just see you as an introduction service. They don't want to tell you if, like, you might not find out if they're interviewing. They'll go and set up interviews direct. They can almost take you away from it, which
mm,
takes away a lot of our power when it
mm,
comes to preparing candidates, debriefing clients, and how much we can actually influence the whole process. So
mm,
you gotta in DAC, you have to really get that influence. You have
mm.
to own it from the start, from the very first call.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like a double-edged sword. It sounds like they're a lot more susceptible, they're a lot more open to working with recruiters. But there's a possibility that they can take too much control of the situation.
Yeah,
Um,
you have to educate them how recruiters work. And
mm,
again, I remember when I started, I was happy to just sign terms and send over CVs, and then your processes just aren't moving, or candidates aren't getting feedback, and you're not getting feedback, and you're like, oh, this isn't what I'm used to. Um,
mm.
but yeah, just have to really set those foundations early on.
Love that, man. How much of the podcast contributed to you penetrating the German market? Anto, was it a lot? Was it 50%? Or I'm just curious, how much did that play a part in it?
Oh, so everything I've ever done has been in the DAC region.
Mm.
All my business
Okay,
ever.
cool. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So I don't know
Hard to put a number
exactly
on it.
how much,
Yeah,
but
cool,
yeah,
man. No,
like
no
a
worries.
lot
I
of it.
thought I thought you used the podcast to penetrate, but you've been working in those
I d-
markets for many, many
I
years.
Yeah. So at Trenovo, so I started doing Germany at Aldis. I was their
Cool,
first
cool, cool.
employee,
Yeah.
and I just jumped in doing the data AI market while doing events, while doing podcasts, and then it just really worked really well. So I just kind of like double, triple down on the amount I was doing because it was really helping with candidate or client acquisition.
Mm,
Um,
cool, cool, cool.
but then yeah, you have to quickly realize that it's not all about client acquisition. It's about quality of the clients. It's
Yeah.
about how much you actually can make or place with them. And that's what I mean, like getting that control or getting that friend zone. There was a lot of training and learning curves that I sort of went through, but nobody had the answers beforehand. Not for me anyway. So yeah, I would say like right now we've even gone as far as to tell clients that we'll only have them on the podcast if they do and sign terms and conditions with us, or
Oh wow.
if they want to speak at an event that we're hosting, or if they want to host an event. There's the thing. You have to sign our terms and conditions to be a recruitment partner.
Love that. How's that? I'm just curious. What's been the success rate of that? Has that been pretty good or?
Pretty good, yeah.
That's
yeah,
awesome, man. Wow.
You'd be surprised because I think though it's again like I've got this reputation of doing events in Germany and DACH region for 7 years.
Yeah.
Podcasting for 7 years in Germany and DACH. I've got pretty good followership. Deep Rec has got a pretty good followership already for only a small business and less than a year old. I think it kind of holds a little bit of weight.
Yeah, of course.
And then when you create this reputation that precedes itself, again, you can tell companies, right, this is the value of it. We've got information about how companies have made placements off hosting our events at their offices. So it's like, what's the actual cost of you working with us to make 1 or 2 hires if you get all this EVP or you get some direct placements as well? We'll give you access to the people who attended. That's what we do.
Love that. That's like a perfect cycle now. You've spent all the years building up your reputation. It's like a perfect cycle of like them coming on, building your brand, signing up a client. Just very clever, man. Really, really love it. Very cool. And I think we're coming towards the end of the podcast. Thank you so much, mate. This has been super valuable. Genuinely, I've learned a lot, and I think a lot of our members, a lot of our audience who have listened to this are going to take lots of nuggets for BD, for starting a podcast, for just doing a better job in recruitment. So thank you so much, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Cheers, lads. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. Tune in for another episode next week, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Peace and love.